It was the SDCE who uncovered a Soviet mole in the cabinet of de Gaulle, who also happened to be a liaison man with the CIA in Langley. In order to discredit the SDCE, Allen Dulles, who hated de Gaulle, the feeling was mutual, had one of its agents, Roger Delouet, caught with $12 million worth of heroin in his possession. After a great deal of expert interrogation, Delouet confessed, but was unable to say why he was smuggling drugs into the United States. The whole thing stank to high heaven of a setup. Based upon an examination of SDC methods in protecting de Gaulle, especially in motorcades, the FBI, Secret Service, and the CIA knew exactly how to strip President Kennedy of his security and make it easy for the three Permindex shooters to murder him in Dealey Plaza in November 1963. Another example of fact disguised as fiction is the Leon Uris novel, Topaz. In Topaz, we find a factual account of the activities of Thiraud de Vosjoli, the very KGB agent uncovered by SDC and denounced as the KGB's liaison man with the CIA. There are many fictionalized accounts of the Mossad's activities, nearly all of which are based on fact. The Mossad is also known as the Institute. Many would-be writers make nonsensical statements about it, especially one writer who is much in favor with the Christian right wing, which is accepted as truth. One can pardon the offender because he has no intelligence training, but that does not stop him from dropping Mossad names all over the place. Such disinformation exercises are routinely run against American right-wing patriotic groups. Originally, the Mossad consisted of three groups: the Bureau of Military Intelligence, the Political Department of the Foreign Office, and the Department of Security, Sharut Habitation. David Ben-Gurion, a member of the Committee of 300, received some considerable help from MI6 in putting it together. But it was not a success, and in 1951, Sir William Stevenson of MI6 restructured it into a single unit as arm of the Political Department of the Israeli Foreign Office, with a special operations group for espionage and black job operations. British intelligence gave further assistance in training and equipping for servicing the Sarayet Maktal, also known as the General Staff Reconnaissance Unit, in the format of Britain's Special Air Service, SAS. This service unit of the Mossad is never mentioned by name and is known simply as the Guys. The Guys are merely an extension of British intelligence's SAS unit, who continually train and update them in new methods. It was the Guys who killed the leaders of the PL-0 and kidnapped Adolf Eichmann. The Guys, and indeed all Mossad agents, operate on a wartime footing. The Mossad has a tremendous advantage over other intelligence services in that every country in the world has a large Jewish community. By studying social and criminal records, the Mossad is able to pick agents among local Jews. It can have a holdover and make them work for it without pay. The Mossad also has the advantage of having access to the records of all U.S. law enforcement agencies and U.S. intelligence services, the Office of Naval Intelligence, OM. ELINT services the Mossad at no cost to Israel. Citizens of the United States would be shocked, angered, and dismayed if ever it was discovered just how much the Mossad knows about the lives of millions of Americans in every walk of life, even those who are not political in any way. The first head of the Mossad, Reuben Shiloch, was made a member of the Committee of 300, but it is not known whether his successor enjoyed the same privilege. Chances are that he does. The Mossad has a skillful disinformation service. The amount of disinformation it feeds to the American market is embarrassing, but even more embarrassing is how it is swallowed hook, line, and sinker and all. What we are actually witnessing in the microcosm of the Mossad is the extent of control exercised by the Olympians over the intelligence services, entertainment, publishing, opinion-making, polls, and the television news media on a global scale. Ted Turner was recently given a seat on the Committee of 300 in recognition for his news-making CNN broadcasts. The committee has the power and the means to tell the people of this world anything, and it will be believed by the vast majority. On every occasion that a researcher happens upon this as-tounding central control group, he is either successfully bought off or else he undergoes some specialty training at the Tavistock Institute, after which he becomes a contributor to more fiction of the James Bond type, that is, he is derailed and well rewarded. If such a person as John F. Kennedy should stumble onto the truth about who directs world events and cannot be bought, he is assassinated. In the case of John F. Kennedy, the assassination was carried out with great attendant publicity and with the utmost brutality to serve as a warning to world leaders not to get out of line. Pope John Paul I was quietly murdered because he was getting close to the Committee of 300 through Freemasons in the Vatican hierarchy. His successor, Pope John Paul XI, was publicly humiliated as a warning to cease and desist, which he has done. As we shall see, certain Vatican leaders are today seated on the Committee of 300. It is easy to put serious researcher off track of the Committee of 300 because Britain's MI6, SAS, promotes a wide variety of cookery such as the New Age, Yogaism, Zen Buddhism, witchcraft, Delphic priesthood of Apollo, Aristotle was a member, and hundreds of small cults of all kinds. A group of retired British intelligence agents who stayed on the track labeled the conspirators' hierarchy Force X and declared that it possesses a super-intelligence service that has corrupted the KGB, the Vatican intelligence, the CIA, the ONI, DGSE, U.S. military intelligence, the State Department Intelligence Service, and even the most secret of all U.S. intelligence agencies, the Office of National Reconnaissance. The existence of the National Reconnaissance Office, NRO, was known to only a handful of people outside of the Committee of 300 until Truman stumbled upon it quite by accident. Churchill had a hand in setting up the NRO, and he was reportedly livid when Truman discovered its existence. Churchill, more than any other servant of the Committee of 300, considered Truman his little man from independence without an independence at all. This referred to Truman's every move being controlled by Freemasonry. Even today, NRO's annual budget is not known to the Congress of the United States, and it is responsible to only a selected few in Congress. But it is a creature of the Committee of 300 to whom its reports are routinely sent every few hours. Thus, the fictionalized spoofs one sees about the various branches and arms of control of the committee were designed to take suspicion away from the real thing. But we should never doubt that the real thing does indeed exist. Take another example of what I mean, the book The Day of the Jackal, from which a highly successful movie was created. The events related in the book are factual, although for obvious reasons the names of some of the players and the locales were changed, but the thrust of the story, that a single MI6 operative was assigned to get rid of General Charles de Gaulle, is absolutely correct. General de Gaulle had become unmanageable, refusing to cooperate with the committee, whose existence he knew very well since he had been invited to join it, came to a climax when de Gaulle withdrew France from NATO and immediately began building his own nuclear force, the so-called Force de Frappe. This so angered the committee that de Gaulle's assassination was ordered. But the French Secret Intelligence Service was able to intercept Jackal's plans and keep de Gaulle safe. In the light of the record of MI6, which I might add is the Committee of 300's main resource when it comes to intelligence, the work done by French intelligence borders on the miraculous. Military Intelligence Department 6 dates back to Sir Francis Walsingham, paymaster of Queen Elizabeth I for dirty tricks operations. Over hundreds of years, MI6 has established a record which no other intelligence agency can come near to duplicating. MI6 agents have gathered information from the four corners of the earth and have carried out secret operations that would astound even the most knowledgeable if ever they were to be made public, which is why it rates as the master service of the Committee of 300. Officially, MI6 does not exist. Its budget comes out of the Queen's purse and private funds and is reported to be in a range of $350, $500 million per annum, but no one knows for sure what the exact amount is. In its present form, MI6 dates back to 1911, when it was under the leadership of Sir Mansfield Cumming, a captain in the Royal Navy, who was always identified by the letter C, from which M of James Bond fame is taken. No official record of MI6's failures and successes exist. It is that secret. Although the Burgess McLean Blake Blunt disasters did great damage to the morale of MI6 officers. Unlike other services, future members are recruited from universities and other areas of learning by highly skilled talent scouts, as we saw in the case of Rhodes Scholars inducted into the Round Table. One of the requirements is an ability to speak foreign languages. Candidates undergo a rigorous blooding. With the backing of such a formidable force, the Committee of 300 had little fear from ever being exposed, and this will go on for decades. What makes the committee incredible is the incredible secrecy that prevails. None of the news media has ever made mention of this conspiratorial hierarchy. Therefore, as is to be expected, people doubt its existence. The Committee of 300 is for the most part under the control of the British monarch, in this case, Elizabeth II. Queen Victoria is believed to have been quite paranoid about keeping it secret and went to great lengths to cover up Masonic writings left at the scene of Jack the Ripper murders, which alluded to the Committee of 300's connections with experiments carried out by a family member who was also a highly placed member of the Scottish Rite of Freemasonry. The Committee of 300 is filled with members of British aristocracy, which has corporate interests and associates in every country of the world, including the USSR. The committee's structure is as follows. The Tavistock Institute at Sussex University and London sites is owned and controlled by the Royal Institute for International Affairs, whose Hofjuden in America is Henry Kissinger. The Eagle Star Group, which changed its name to the Star Group after the close of the Second World War, is composed of a group of major international companies involved in overlapping and interfaced areas: 1. Insurance, 2. Banking, 3. Real estate, 4. Entertainment, 5. High technology, including cybernetics, electronic communications, etc. Banking, while not the mainstay, is vitally important, especially in the areas where banks act as clearinghouses and money launderers of drug money. The main big-name banks are the Bank of England, the Federal Reserve Banks, Bank of International Settlements, the World Bank, and the Hong Kong and Shanghai Bank. American Express Bank is a means of recycling drug dollars. Each of these banks is affiliated with and/or controls hundreds of thousands of large and small banks throughout the world. Banks large and small in the thousands are in the Committee of 300 network, including Banca Commerciale d'Italia, Banca Privata, Banco Ambrosiano, the Netherlands Bank, Barclays Bank, Banco del Colombia, Banco de Ibero-America. Of special interest is Banca della Svizzera Italiana, BSI, since it handles flight capital investments to and from the United States, primarily in dollars and U.S. bonds, located and isolated in neutral Lugano, the flight capital center for the Venetian black nobility. Lugano is not in Italy or in Switzerland and is a kind of a twilight zone for shady flight capital operations. George Ball, who owns a large block of stock in BSI, is a prominent insider and the Hanks U.S. representative. BCCI, BNL, Banco Mercantil de Mexico, Banco Nacional de Panama, Bangkok Metropolitan Bank, Bank Leumi, Bank Hapoalim, Standard Bank, Bank of Geneva, Bank of Ireland, Bank of Scotland, Bank of Montreal, Bank of Nova Scotia, Banque Paris et Pays Bas, British Bank of the Middle East, and the Royal Bank of Canada, to name but a very small number in a huge list of specialty banks. The Oppenheimers of South Africa are much bigger heavyweights than the Rockefellers. For instance, in 1981, Harry Oppenheimer, chairman of the giant Anglo-American corporation that controls gold and diamond mining, sales, and distribution in the world, stated that he was about to launch into the North American banking market. Oppenheimer promptly invested $10 billion in a specially created vehicle for the purpose of buying into big banks in the U.S., among which was Citicorp. Oppenheimer's investment vehicle was called Minorco, which set up shop in Bermuda, a British royal family preserve. On the board of Minorco was to be found Walter Wriston of Citicorp and Robert Clare, its chief counsel. The only other company to rival Oppenheimer in the field of precious metals and minerals was Consolidated Goldfields of South Africa, but Oppenheimer took control of it with a 28% stake, the largest single stockholder. Thus, gold, diamonds, platinum, titanium, tantalite, copper, iron ore, uranium, and 52 other metals and minerals, many of them of absolutely vital strategic value to United States, passed into the hands of the Committee of 300. Thus was the vision of one of the earlier South African members of the Committee of 300, Cecil John Rhodes, fully realized, a vision which started with the spilling of the blood of thousands upon thousands of white farmers and their families in South Africa, whom history records as the Boers. While the United States stood by with folded hands, as did the rest of the world, this small nation was subjected to the most vicious war of genocide in history. The United States will be subjected to the same treatment by the Committee of 300 when our turn comes, and it will not be long in coming. Insurance companies play a key role in the business of the Committee of 300. Among these are found such top insurance companies as Assicurazioni Generali of Venice and Riunione Adriatica di Sicurezza, the largest and second-largest insurance companies in the world, who keep their bank accounts at Bank of International Settlements in Swiss gold francs. Both control a multiplicity of investment banks whose turnover in stocks on Wall Street double that of U.S. investors. Prominent on the board of these two insurance giants are Committee of 300 members, the Giustiniani family, black nobility of Rome and Venice, who trace their lineage to the Emperor Justinian, Sir Jocelyn Hambro of Hambros, Merchant Bank, Pierpaolo Luzzati Feques, whose lineage dates back 6 centuries to the most ancient Luzzatos, the black nobility of Venice, and Umberto Ortolani of the ancient black nobility family of the same name. Other old Venetian black nobility committee of 300 members and board members of ASG and RAS are the Doria family, the financiers of the Spanish Habsburgs, Élie de Rothschild of the French Rothschild family, Baron August von Fink, the second richest man in Germany, is now deceased, Franco Orsini Bonacassi of the ancient Orsini black nobility that traces its lineage to an ancient Roman senator of the same name, the Alba family whose lineage dates back to the great Duke of Alba, and Baron Pierre Lambert, a cousin of the Belgian Rothschild family. The English companies controlled by the British royal family are Eagle Star, Prudential Assurance Company, the Prudential Insurance Company, which own and control most American insurers, including Allstate Insurance. At the head of the list is Eagle Star, probably the most powerful front for Military Intelligence Department 6, MI6. Eagle Star, although nowhere near as large as Assicurazioni Generale, is perhaps equally important simply because it is owned by members of the Queen of England's family, and as titular head of the Committee of 300, Eagle Star makes a tremendous impact. Eagle Star is more than a major front for MI6. It is also a front for major British banks, including Hill Samuels, N.M. Rothschild and Sons, one of the gold price fixers who meet daily in London, and Barclays Bank, one of the funders of the African National Congress, ANC. It can be said with a great degree of accuracy that the most powerful British oligarchical families created Eagle Star as a vehicle for black operations against those who oppose Committee of 300 policies. Unlike the CIA, British law makes it a serious crime to name MI6 officials, so the following is but a partial list of top brass of MI6, who are or were also members of the Committee of 300: Lord Hartley Shawcross, Sir Brian Edward Mountain, Sir Kenneth Keith, Sir Kenneth Strong, Sir William Stevenson, Sir William Wiseman. All of the foregoing are or were heavily involved in key Committee of 300 companies, which interface with literally thousands of companies engaged in every branch of commercial activity, as we shall see. Some of these companies include Rank Organization, Xerox Corporation, ITT, IBM, RCA, CBS, NBC, BBC and CBC in communications, Raytheon, Textron, Bendix, Atlantic Richfield, British Petroleum, Royal Dutch Shell, Marine Midland Bank, Lehman Brothers, Kuhn Loeb, General Electric, Westinghouse Corporation, United Fruit Company, and a great many more. MI6 ran a large number of these companies through British intelligence stationed in the RCA building in New York, which was the headquarters of its chief officer, Sir William Stephenson. Radio Corporation of America, RCA, was formed by GE, Westinghouse, Morgan Guaranty and Trust, acting for the British Crown, and United Fruit, back in 1919 as a British intelligence center. RCA's first president was J.P. Morgan's Owen Young, after whom the Young Plan was named. In 1929, David Sarnoff was appointed to run RCA. Sarnoff had acted as an assistant to Young at the 1919 Paris Peace Conference, where a fallen Germany was stabbed in the back by the victorious Allies. A network of Wall Street banks and brokerage houses takes care of the stock market for the committee, and prominent among these are Blythe, Eastman Dillon, the Morgan Groups, Lazard Frères, and Kuhn Loeb Rhodes. Nothing happens on Wall Street that is not controlled by the Bank of England, whose instructions are relayed through the Morgan Groups and then put into action through key brokerage houses whose top executives are ultimately responsible for carrying out committee directives. Before it overstepped the limits laid down by Morgan Guaranty, Drexel Burnham Lambert was a favorite of the Committee of 300. In 1981, almost every major brokerage house on Wall Street had sold out to the committee, Fibro merging with Salomon Brothers. Fibro is the business arm of the Oppenheimers of Anglo-American Corporation. By this control mechanism, the Committee of 300 ensures that its members and their far-flung business corporations turned their investments on Wall Street over at a rate of double that of the non-insider foreign investors. Remember, some of the richest families in the world live in Europe, so it is natural that they should have a preponderance of members on the committee. The von Thurn-Woon-Taxis family, who once owned the German postal franchise, make David Rockefeller look like a very poor relation. The von Thurn-Woon-Taxis dynasty dates back 300 years, and generation after generation of family members have had seats on the committee which they occupy to this day. We have already mentioned by name many of the most wealthy Venetian black nobility members of the Committee of 300, and other names will be added as we come across them in their various fields of endeavor. Now we shall include some American members of the Committee of 300 and try to trace their affiliations and connections to the British Crown. How can these facts be verified? Actually, some of them cannot be verified because the information comes straight out of intelligence files. But with a lot of legwork, there are many sources which can verify at least part of the facts. The work would involve a diligent search of Dun & Bradstreet Reference Book of Corporations, Standard & Poor's, British and American Who's Who, with long hours of hard work in cross-referencing names with their corporate affiliations. Committee of 300 corporations, banks, and insurance companies operate under the unified command covering every conceivable matter of strategy and cohesive action. The committee is the only organized power hierarchy in the world, transcending all governments and individuals, however powerful and secure they may feel themselves to be. This covers finance, defense matters, and political parties of all colors and types. There is no entity the committee cannot reach and control, and that includes organized religions of the world. This, then, is the all-powerful Olympian Group, whose power base is in London and the City of London's financial centers, with its grip on minerals, metals and precious gems, cocaine, opium and pharmaceutical drugs, rentier financier bankers, cult promoters, and founders of rock music. The British Crown is the control point from which all things radiate. As the saying goes, they have a finger in every pie. It is obvious that the communications field is tightly controlled. Going back to RCA, we find that its directorate is composed of British-American establishment figures who feature prominently in other organizations, such as the CFR, NATO, the Club of Rome, the Trilateral Commission, Freemasonry, Skull and Bones, Bilderbergers, Round Table, Milner Society, and the Jesuits' Aristotle Society. Among them was David Sarnoff, who moved to London at the same time Sir William Stephenson moved into the RCA building in New York. All three major television networks came as spin-offs from RCA, especially the National Broadcasting Company, NBC, which was first, closely followed by the American Broadcasting Company, ABC, in 1951. The third big television network was Columbia Broadcasting System, CBS, which, like its sister companies, was, and still is, dominated by British intelligence. William Paley was trained in mass brainwashing techniques at the Tavistock Institute prior to being passed as qualified to head CBS. Thus, if we the people of the United States but knew it, all our major television networks are subject to British oversight, and information they provide first goes to London for clearance. It is interesting to note that the Tavistock intelligence paper written by Stanford Research Institute, commonly named The Aquarian Conspiracy, was funded by donations from all three major television networks. All three major networks are represented on the Committee of 300 and are affiliated with the giant of the mass communication business, the Xerox Corporation of Rochester, New York, whose Robert M. Beck holds a seat on the committee. Beck is also a director of the Prudential Life Insurance Company, which is a subsidiary of the London Prudential Assurance Company Limited. Others on the board of Xerox are Howard Clark of the American Express Company, one of the main conduits for moving drug money through traveler's checks, former Secretary of the Treasury, William Simon, and Saul Linowitz, who negotiated the Panama Canal treaties for the committee. Linowitz is important to the committee by virtue of his long-standing expertise in laundering drug money through Marine Midland and the Hong Kong and Shanghai Bank. Another Xerox board member is Robert Spruill, who is of real interest because, as president of the University of Rochester, he allowed the Tavistock Institute, working through the CIA, to use the university's facilities for the 20-year MK Ultra LSD experiments. Some 85 other universities in the U.S. also allowed their facilities to be misused in this manner. As giant-sized as Xerox is, it is dwarfed by the Rank Organization, a London-based conglomerate fully controlled by members of Queen Elizabeth's immediate family. Notable members of the Board of Rank Organization, who are also members of the Committee of 300, are the following: Lord Helsby, chairman of the Drug Money Clearinghouse, Midland Bank. Helsby's other positions include a directorship in the giant Imperial Group and the Industrial and Commercial Finance Corporation. Sir Arnold France, a director of Tube Investments who runs the London Underground train service. France is also a director of the Bank of England, which has so much control over the Federal Reserve banks. Sir Dennis Mountain, chairman of the mighty Eagle Star Group and a director of English Property Corps, one of the rentier financier companies of the British royal family. One such member is the Honourable Angus Ogilvy, Prince of Companies, who is married to Her Royal Highness Princess Alexandria, sister of the Duke of Kent, leader of the Scottish Rite of Freemasonry, and who takes the place of the Queen when she is outside of Britain. Ogilvy is a director of the Bank of England and chairman of the giant Lonrho conglomerate. It was Lonrho that ended the rule of Ian Smith in Rhodesia so that he could be replaced by Robert Mugabe. At stake was Rhodesia's chrome mines, which produce the finest high-grade chrome ore in the world. Cyril Hamilton, chairman of the Standard and Chartered Bank, the old Lord Milner Cecil Rhodes Bank, and a board member of the Bank of England. Hamilton is also on the board of the Xerox Corporation, the Malta International Banking Corporation, a Knights of Malta Bank, a director of the Standard Bank of South Africa, the largest bank in that country, and a director of the Banque Belge d'Afrique. Lord O'Brien of Lotherby, past president of the British Bankers Association, director of Morgan Grenfell, a powerful bank, Dyer, Torr of Prudential Assurance, director of J.P. Morgan, director of the Bank of England, a board member of the Bank of International Settlements, a director of the giant Unilever conglomerate. Sir Ray Geddes, chairman of the giant Dunlop and Pirelli tire companies, director of the Midland and International Banks, director of the Bank of England. Note how many of these powerful men are directors of the Bank of England, which makes control of American fiscal policies simple. Many of these organizations and institutions, companies and banks are so interfaced and interlocked as to make it an almost impossible task to sort them out. On RCA's board sits Thornton Bradshaw, president of Atlantic Richfield, and a member of NATO, World Wildlife Fund, the Club of Rome, the Aspen Institute for Humanistic Studies, the Council on Foreign Relations. Bradshaw is also chairman of NBC. The most important function of RCA remains its service to British intelligence. It is not generally known how powerful was the role played by the Committee of 300 in stopping the investigation into the CIA, which Senator McCarthy almost succeeded in pulling off. Had McCarthy been successful, it is very likely that President John F. Kennedy would be alive today. When McCarthy said he was going to summon William Bundy to appear before his commission of inquiry, panic swept Washington and London. Bundy, had he been called to testify, would most probably have cracked and opened the door to the special relations that existed between British oligarchical circles and their cousins in the United States government. Such a possibility could not be entertained. The Royal Institute of International Affairs was called in to put an end to McCarthy. The RIIA chose Alan Dulles, a man who was totally enamored of decadent British society, to attack McCarthy head-on. Dulles put Patrick Lyman and Richard Helms in charge of the McCarthy case. Helms was later rewarded for his service against McCarthy by being made head of the CIA. General Mark Clark, a member of the CFR and a well-liked military man in London circles, was appointed by General Eisenhower to turn back McCarthy's full-fledged attack on the CIA. McCarthy was preempted when Clark announced that a special committee was to be appointed to examine the agency. Clark, on instructions from the RIIA, recommended a congressional watchdog committee to periodically examine the work of government intelligence agencies. The whole thing was a super tragedy for America and a victory for the British, who feared that McCarthy would accidentally stumble onto the Committee of 300 and its control over every aspect of United States affairs. Lehman Brothers Kuhn Loeb's former chairman, Peter G. Peterson, served under former MI6 Chief Sir William Wiseman, and as such was no stranger to British royalty. Peterson is tied in with Aspen Institute, yet another arm of British intelligence. John R. Petty is president and chairman of the Marine Midland Bank, a bank whose drug trade connections have been well established long before it was taken over by the Hong Kong and Shanghai Bank, probably the #1 bank in the opium trade, a position it has held since 1814. But the best proof I can offer of the existence of the Committee of 300 is the rank organization, which, in conjunction with Eagle Star, is the British Crown. It is also the Black Operations Center of MI6, SIS. Between them, these two Committee of 300 companies control Her Majesty's Dominion of Canada, using the Hofjuden-Bronfman family to carry out their orders. Trizec Holdings, ostensibly owned by the Bronfman family, is in reality the main asset of the Queen of England's in Canada. The entire Southeast Asian opium trade interfaces with the Bronfman Empire and is one of the means whereby heroin is brought to America. In a sense, Canada is like Switzerland, pristine snow, covered landscapes, big cities, a place of great beauty, but underneath lies a deep layer of filth and dirt arising from its massive heroin trade. The Bronfman family are cutouts, what is known in MI6 as frontmen, controlled from London by MI6 deskmen, intelligence jargon for controllers at headquarters. Edgar Bronfman, the family leader, was sent to Moscow Center, cover name for the KGB headquarters at 2 Dzerzhinsky Square, Moscow, on a large number of occasions.